New Cumnock is a town in East Ayrshire, Scotland. It expanded during the coal mining era from the late 18th century, and mining remained its key industry until its pits were shut in the 1960s. The town is 5.7 miles southeast of Cumnock, and 21 miles east of Ayr. Transport. Public transport links include the New Cumnock railway station on the Glasgow South Western Line and the A76 Kilmarnock to Dumfries Trunk Road. Coal mining. Open-cast coal mining was one of the main employers in the village, before the closure of the open-cast works was announced in May 2013, resulting in the loss of a number of jobs. In 1950, 13 people were killed in a mining disaster at the Nilfanion Castle colliery. A film was made about the disaster called The Brave Don't Cry, and there is a memorial at the site of the disaster. The Scottish Wildlife Trust took over the Nilfanion Bing, turning into a wetland reserve with paths. History. One of the first mentions of the village was when Patrick Dunbar of Commoner signed the Ragman Roll of 1296. Blind Harry's poem The Actes and Deeds of the illustrious and valiant Championshire William Wallace placed William Wallace in and around the village 4 times in his heroic tales of the Patriot, calling it Cumnock and Dunbar's Castle, which sat on Castle Hill in the midst of a vast loch, as Black Bog Castle. Both William Wallace and Robert Bruce were hunted within the Afton's Glen, where Robert Burns' Sweet Afton still flows gently, until it merges into the River Nith. Wallace seems to have known the surrounding area very well indeed. In fact, many believe he may have spent much of his youth there. There is even a Castle William up the Glen, said to have been used as a fortress by him. The name of the settlement changed through time, referred to as Cumnock Castle on Timothy Pont's map of Ayrshire c. 1600. In 1509, Cumnock was made a borough of barony, and a market began at Cumnock Kirk, 6 miles northwest of Cumnock Castle. In 1659, a new kirk was built near Cumnock Castle and became known as the New Kirk of Cumnock, now called the Old Kirk of New Cumnock. Cumnock Kirk became known as Old Cumnock and is now known as Cumnock. William Wallace. The parish of New Cumnock's association with William Wallace, like many other places throughout Scotland, has its origins in Blind Harry's 15th-century epic work, The Wallace. Harry places Wallace in the parish of New Cumnock on no fewer than 4 occasions that span the period from 1296 through to his betrayal in July 1305 and his martyrdom in London on the 23rd of August 1305. In 1296, William Wallace and his men were forced to turn back from New Cumnock because the road at Cumnock had been destroyed. At Cumnock the gate was built that tied the main route from Nithsdale to Ayrshire passed by Cumnock Hill in the east of the parish where, since 1205, a toll and customs point had stood. Wallace's detour took him to Avondale, where he and his men defeated an English force at Loudon Hill. In May of the following year, Wallace slew the English sheriff of Lanark, and soon after Blind Harry places Wallace and his men at New Cumnock again. To the Black Crag in Cumnock passed again his household set with men of Meckelmaine, Thre Mundas Thar he dwellet in Gudrest. Wallace's household at Black Crag is in the lands of Black Crag in the upper reaches of the Afton Water. In September 1297, Wallace had joined forces with Sir Andrew Murray and defeated the English army at Stirling Bridge. In the spring and early summer of 1298, Wallace, now Sir William and Guardian of Scotland, spent time consolidating his position, and this may be the period of Harry's 3 months' rest. rest from warfare. It was also during this period that Wallace paid a visit to his uncle Sir Ranald Crawford in Ayr, before in Cumnock until his duelling when he defeated the hands of Edward I at Falkirk in July 1298 resulted in Wallace relinquishing his guardianship of Scotland, and as Edward I tightened his grip and control over the nobles of Scotland, Wallace had become no more than an unwanted rebel to many that once had considered him Scotland's saviour. The last place Blind Harry has Wallace at before his capture and betrayal at Glasgow in July 1305 is at home in Blackcraig, New Cumnock, and Wallace passed in Cumnock with Blithewell at the Black Rock, qua he was wont to be, upon that stead a rival house held he. In 1999, these words took on a new significance. The Wallace seal was discovered and thereupon emblazoned was William Wallace, son of Alan Wallace, while within the Ragman roll of 1296, we find Alan Wallace, Crown Tenant in Ayrshire. Clearly then the Wallace family were no vassals of the Stuarts, and the tenuous links with William Wallace and the Stuart lands of Elderslie in Renfrewshire and those of Kyle Stuart in Ayrshire can be discounted. The Crown lands in Ayrshire are found in King's Kyle, and it is here that Blackcraig Hill in the parish of New Cumnock dominates the landscape. Across the Afton water stands the ruined cottage of Over Blackcraig in the shadow of a glorious rocky outcrop known as Castle William. For upon this stead Sir William Wallace held a rival house, a crown property. Robert the Bruce. On the 10th of February 1306, Robert the Bruce killed John Cummin at Greyfriars Kirk, Dumfries. By May of that year Bruce was crowned King of Scots at Scone, but early setbacks against English force saw him seek refuge in the Western Isles and then in Ireland. In the spring of 1307 Bruce and his followers returned to the Scottish mainland and ambushed an English force under the command of Sir Aymer de Valence at Glentrool, Galloway. Worse was to follow for the beleaguered Valence, when on the 10th of May 1307 he and his men were defeated by Bruce at Loudon Hill, Ayrshire. John Barber in his epic work, The Bruce, tells how the King of Scots then took refuge in Cumnock, where it was straightest, i.e. steepest, a reference to Blackcraig and Craigbrainiach hills in the upper reaches of Glen Afton, New Cumnock. Here he was joined by Sir James Douglas, who warned of the impending danger. Supplies had been sent to the English garrison of 30 men-at-arms and 100 infantry at Cumnock Castle. At the meeting place of the Afton Water and Rivenith and Aymer de Valence's forces were to be joined by John of Lorne and his Auchthunter men. Lorne, a nephew of John Cummin and a sworn enemy of Bruce, had brought with him a sleuth hound which reputedly had belonged to the king, to help track down his former master. To no avail, for again Bruce and his 400 men evaded capture, this time up in the Strenthers, i.e. the hills of New Cumnock. Local folklore suggests that Stayamera rock face on Craigbrainiach Hill overlooking Craig's Farm was named as a taunt to the English commander. The Valence, Stay Emery, i.e. stay, keep chasing the Bruce. Edward I of England's patience over his commander's incompetence had run out. He raised a great army and headed north to put an end to Bruce once and for all. However, ill health got the better of the aging king and he died on the 7th of July 1307, near Carlisle. His son, now Edward II, marched north through Nithsdale at the head of his father's huge army and arrived at Cumnock Castle. On the 19th of August 1307, Bruce continued to lie low in the hills of southwest Scotland, and Edward II, one of the most powerful kings in Europe, was left to hold court and carry on with the business of the day at Cumnock Castle for 8 days in August. Intriguingly, one of the payments he made during that time was to a poor woman for bringing 2 dogs to him. Were these the hounds that failed to hunt Bruce down in Glen Afton? Edward II soon gave up the fruitless search and returned to England. Evading capture, Bruce and his men were able to break free from the southwest of Scotland and overcome his enemies within Scotland in 7 years. Later, Edward II returned at the head of another army only to be defeated by Bruce at the Battle of Bannockburn. In June 1314, Robert Burns was a frequent visitor to the town and made a few friends in the area. There are plaques on several buildings in and around New Cumnock. Robert Burns frequently mentions Corsoncon Hill, referring to it as Parnassus Hill in Greek mythology. Parnassus Hill was where Apollo slew the giant serpent Python. Sport. The local football club is Glenafton Athletic FC. Former players include Ted McMinn. Notable places within New Cumnock. New Cumnock was notable for a number of significant Christian revivals in the early half of the 20th century, including a sizable number of conversions in 1921. A strong Christian heritage continues in the village by way of Christian fellowships in Bridgend Gospel Hall, New Cumnock Evangelical Church, New Cumnock Baptist Church, New Cumnock Church of Scotland. Notable people: Billy Dodds, footballer; Tom Hunter, businessman; Sandy McGinn, footballer; Colin McClotchy, footballer; Rab Wilson, poet. Views in and around New Cumnock.